All right, we've got a pretty short one today. We're going to be talking about server-side template injection. Without any further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into this. So, what is it? Well, basically, it's injecting some kind of logic into the underlying template engine in the form of you're going to be injecting like template syntax. And hopefully, if everything works out, the underlying server will, you know, perform some kind of logic based on the command you use and will run whatever command you typed in, depending on obviously what you typed. So, but that being said, what's a template engine? They're places on web applications or websites where dynamic data that is sometimes user controlled is placed on the static site in some way. So, the example we've got here is like if you've got a template file that takes in a data point called name, and that's defined somewhere else in the the web stack. Whoops, that's defined somewhere else in the application stack. The template engine will, use the template file and the data that's being fed to it to create an output in the form of HTML or CSS or whatever your pages were built off of, and concatenate that. So, in this case, it's like a greeting message on a website, which isn't uncommon. But you'll sometimes see it with searches. You might see it with comment functionalities on like forums. So things like that. When we talk about detecting this and identifying it, basically, you want to take advantage of the template engine's syntax, because that's how you're going to be, executing any kind of logic on behalf of the template engine. So these characters tend to be common with this, but then again, it doesn't hurt to fuzz just all the special characters you can think of, really, because basically all those ones on the first row of your keyboard with the number keys, those all might, give you some decent results. So just try all those, see if you can get some interesting error messages to occur. And that resulting behavior, for example, using this flowchart, could kind of help you narrow down what technology is there. Now, the technology isn't always going to be super straightforward to enumerate. Sometimes you'll have to use a lot more context clues and maybe even trial and error to get it to work. But thankfully on the internet, there's no shortage of, vulnerability, like research results. There's no shortage of vulnerability results. There's no shortage of places you can find payloads like GitHub. So, but if worse comes to worse, you might have to develop your own exploit. And so, in this case, you would have to pretty much read the documentation for that template engine and figure out how you could execute a payload. That being said, exploitation, like I kind of touched on, is really dependent on the context in which you're injecting it, what template language is being used, what that syntax is like. If you're allowed to enter characters of that syntax, maybe you'll have to encode your payload, maybe you won't have to. And this is kind of what typical execution might look like. So you can see 7 times 7 is the logic that's injected in here, and it returns back 49. Sometimes it'll return back 7, and that can help you narrow down which template engine is being used. So just kind of depends on the context, but I don't think there's a better way of showcasing how this works with an example from Hack the Box. It's the first step on the machine RedPanda. So we're going to jump into that, and then we'll come back here and talk about prevention. All right, here we are in the Hack the Box machine called RedPanda. We do an initial nmap port scan, and we see that SSH and 8080 are open. 8080 is an HTTP proxy. If we load that up in our browser, we see this cool website called RedPanda Search. If I just leave it blank and search, I think it fills it in with Greg for whatever reason. So, it lets you search for things. We can look for like Woodank, okay, Greg. But it should just allow you to search for images. That's the purpose of the site. I've got some payload saved in there. But, if, let's say we're going to start looking for server-side template injection, we might start with that flowchart from earlier, do something like this. And you can see it gives us an error, banned characters. Maybe we can just try 7 times 7 with just the curly braces. It seems to interpret that correctly. It doesn't execute this logic. It leaves the curly braces in. If we just try 7 times 7, though, it works. And you can see it actually does that multiplication. So we know that something is happening here. At least some of that logic, for whatever reason, is being computed on the back end and then returned to us. So what we can do, I think, here is if we look at the page source, and let me make sure I zoom in plenty for you. You can see that Spring Boot is the technology that's being used here. I'm not sure if we can verify that Timeleaf is what's being used here. We might be able to figure that out. But if I look up, like, if I just Google what's popular, I'm pretty sure Spring Boot, or wait, I need to look up, yeah. Maybe if I do Spring Boot one word, we'll see what comes up. And I'm trying to do this just to walk you through, but the ones that come up are Timeleaf, Groovy, FreeMaker, or FreeMarker, and Jade. We'll see if we can get more details. Let me try doing like pound. Gives us the same thing. Let's try, maybe we'll just do like a pound 7 times. Okay, and that gives us this like 49 ENUS, so it gives us a language or something like that. What if we just do, or yeah, star was the same. Let's see. I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I wonder if there's somewhere on the site we can actually verify that this is using Timeleaf, or if we can get the version. Maybe, let me check and see if Wapalizer will actually get any of this. Maybe not. We'll leave it as is. I don't think, I ran a more detailed scan above here, but I don't think this grabbed anything special. But even so, we have a pretty good idea that it's probably Timeleaf. And, you know, Timeleaf is just the engine being used, and we can read through the documentation. It's commonly used in Spring Boot, etc., etc. And if we want to develop an exploit for this, you know, just performing mathematical operations is cool and all, but we want something tangible that we can actually use. So one thing that I tend to look up for these is how to invoke like a static method. We know that this, you know, Spring Boot and Timeleaf are built off of Java. So if we, you know, see something like this, and this is just, I looked up, I think Timeleaf like static method. And the first result is this like GitHub issue page where someone's talking about how they don't know how to mess with it. And to be fair, like it's really hard to find in the docs. At least I found these docs to be really difficult to read. But this gentleman here just left a pretty good answer. T is how you invoke the, or at least you can use this variable to get the full class name. And I think what we're going to want is like Java lang runtime. So, for example, if I just do like, I think it would look like we'd have star, open curly brace, T. I'm pretty sure, let me double check. Yeah. And then we would have our method that we want to call, I'm pretty sure. Or we need the full class name and then the method. So we could do, I think it's java.lang.runtime. Whoops. And then I think we would need to include like, would it be get? And the reason we're using get runtime is because this includes the exec method, which should let us execute a system command. I'm just going to try like ID. Make sure all those parentheses are closed. It looks good to me. Let's just copy this here. And we'll paste it in and see what happens. Okay. It gave us the process ID and some exit value. What if we just remove this, maybe? Okay, so that reads it correctly, but if we have that star in place... Oh, 2 stars breaks it. But 1 is just fine. Okay. So, it looks like it's executing it, but I don't know if it's executing the command or if this is some kind of weird error output that we're getting. So what we can do to resolve that is I'm just going to do netcat listening verbose on port 1337. Let me zoom in, try and make this a little bit more readable. And I'm just going to replace this command with, let's just do, I don't know, netcat. You can see I've got it written there. 10, 10, 14, 31. And do I have that other? Okay, let's try that. you can see that we get a connection from the machine, so we know that it is trying to execute that command that we put in there, so that's good for us anyway. The next step is probably just to see if we can download a file. So I've already got shell.sh here, which is just a reverse shell script that will send a bash shell to port 1337. So we'll start by opening a Python server on port 80 and trying to use wget. Let me zoom in a little here. Oh, that makes it harder to read somehow. Whatever. We'll use wget, http, my IP address. We're at port 80, so it's fine. We'll do shell.sh, press enter. You can see that it looks like it successfully downloaded shell.sh. So now we can close this, listen back on port 1337 like we were. And now we can just run like a bash shell.sh. And just like that, we've got a reverse shell by exploiting server-side template injection. And in this case, that's the whole user step for this machine. I remember when I first did this machine a couple years ago, or about a couple years ago now, I remembered it being really, really difficult for me. But, you know, it's a good learning experience. In this case, there's no intricate sandbox escape. We didn't have to do any fancy encoding. We didn't have to use anything fancy. It's a pretty straightforward example. There's definitely cooler examples out there, especially on PortSwigger's website, but I just thought this one was nice and short and to the point, at least as far as we're concerned for most of these. So that's all we've really got for this. We'll go ahead and jump back in with prevention, and then I'll cut you loose. So the best and most straightforward way to prevent server-side template injection vulnerabilities is to just not allow users to submit or modify new templates. If for some reason that's part of the functionality of the application, though, you might run into issues just because, you know, you'll have to do a lot more extra steps. But even if that is the case, you could try your hardest to separate template logic from the user input, or at least separate that logic as much as possible from any kind of user-controlled variables. And make sure that you're only executing user code in a sandbox environment that is far enough away from the, you know, underlying operating system, so that not only can you make sure that those things don't get run on the operating system, but because they're sandboxed, you can better control which functions and modules the template engine has access to, and moreover, that input has access to. So that's all we got for today. Pretty short one. I'll catch you in the next video.